Federal Executive Council approves setting up of a presidential initiative on continuous audit of public finances.
Presidents Muhammadu Buhari and Jacob Zuma pledged to deepen bilateral relations as the South African leader ends three-day visit to Nigeria.
Suspend plans of unbundling the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. House of Representatives advised Minister of State for Petroleum.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on two issues: Nigeria's foreign policy thrust and the restructuring of NNPC.
Now, apart from defining the aspirations and dignity of our people, a nation's foreign policy thrust also determines that nation's relationship and position in the Committee of Nations.
Well, that's right, Clive. Since 1960, that's when Nigeria attained independence, the Nigeria's external relations obviously has been pursued around a number of concepts, including primarily the decolonization of the African continent, economic diplomacy, citizen diplomacy, and national consensus in foreign policy, and Africa as the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. We've also had such concepts as the concentric circles, as well as the concept of medium powers, amongst others.
The Kingsley, if you recall, this foreign policy, Nigeria has maintained this foreign policy since 1960, as you have said, down through the early 80s. Of course, we know between the 1980s and 1999, it was a different, slightly different policy thrust for federal government, But this administration has, of course, led by President Muhammadu Buhari, has led a robust, if you may, foreign policy, reaching out to nations on the, of course, security of the nation, the economy, and anti-corruption crusade.
Well, that's right. Now, while the foreign policy thrust of the administration and, of course, of the Nigerian nation will form the first leg of our conversation, another issue of interest is the restructuring of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, that is NNPC, a move that has been described by the House of Representatives as illegal.
All right, now Labour say that the NNPC unbundling or restructuring, as the case may be, might lead to job losses. But there is no doubt that the coming of the Buhari administration heightened the expectations of Nigerians and indeed investors alike on the need to reposition the NNPC. And it's on that note to welcome you once again to Good Morning Nigeria, today's edition, Thursday. It's reaching you again from the Nigerian Television Authority on the network service. I am Claire Delabo Abdulrazak. Thank you for joining us.
And just to add, Claire, that the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum, who is also the Group Managing Director of NNPC, has indicated that the restructuring will, of course, have little implication or no implication whatsoever for job losses. But these are issues we'll take up in the second segment of our conversation this morning. I am Kingsley Osadolo. I join Claire in welcoming you to today's edition of the program, as usual, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. All right, you're welcome back, but if you just tuned in, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, foreign policy is the aggregate of initiatives a nation adopts in relation to its dealings with other nations. And for Nigeria, therefore, this will, of course, include the decisions, actions, and interests that constitute the framework for managing the country's relationship with other nations as well as international institutions. Our correspondent, Gabriel Odu, gives us a background to our conversation on Nigeria's foreign policy thrust this morning.
Nigeria, like any other country, has a set piece of our foreign policy, which is the protection and preservation of Nigeria's national interest. Nigeria's national interest is, among others, to remain an indivisible country, secure, and be at peace with her neighbors.
We are faced with new realities in a rapidly changing world. And as the situation demands, you have to go look inwards and rejig your foreign policy to be in tandem with the new realities of a modern world, a 21st century world.
Since independence, Nigeria's foreign policy has not wavered, but has remained stable and focused, with Africa as the centerpiece to citizen diplomacy as well as economic diplomacy.
The new government, where President Muhammadu Buhari has identified 3 basic areas which every foreign service officer must know: security, anti-corruption, economic development, poverty, power sector. These are issues that have serious foreign policy implications. And for them to succeed, we must forge a synergy between our domestic environment, the government agenda and programs on these areas, and take it to the outside world. How can, for instance, in New Delhi, how do we get India to partner with us on each of these?
29 years down the line, since the Kuru Declaration, Nigeria's foreign policy is now being assessed and its delivery capacity in focus.
It's a challenge. I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is trying to be first among equals, by actually assembling all the foreign service officers of directorate cadre to come and have assessment of an internal assessment, see how we are doing, what we've been doing right, what we've been doing wrong, and how we can improve and foster the national interests of Nigeria abroad.
Experts say more needs to be done in terms of strategy, monitoring and evaluation mechanisms for an efficient and effective foreign policy for Nigeria.
All right, Gabriel Odo, we thank you for that background report, and it is our pleasure to welcome in our midst this morning the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyema. Mr. Geoffrey Onyema, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Well, Honourable Minister, let's begin. I know that Nigerians and indeed others often get excited by catchphrases that are used to label or otherwise describe the foreign policy thrust of a given administration. In the instant case, what is the foreign policy thrust of the administration and how has it been labeled?
Well, we try to avoid catchphrases under this administration. Of course, you know the priorities of the president of this administration: security, the economy, anti-corruption. So obviously with your foreign policy, you want to project what you have identified as your national priorities. So to a certain extent, this is what we're doing. But within the framework of economic diplomacy, we're of the firm belief that the real challenge today for Nigeria and every country in the world is really economic. If we cannot industrialize and develop our economy, we're not going to have much of a say in the world today. So it's really economic diplomacy. Now, we want to be very practical about it. We don't want it to remain theory and catchphrases. So what do we mean concretely by economic diplomacy in this context? What we're trying to do now in the Foreign Ministry, we identify 3 basic pillars, if you want. Africa, which, as you know, is the centerpiece, has always been the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy, the outside world, and the Nigerian diaspora. So what are the concrete mechanisms we want to put in place to really give effect to our economic diplomacy strategy? As far as Africa is concerned, what is clear is that intra-African trade is extremely low. We are considered the largest economy in Africa, and we also have to be looking to play that leadership role, leadership economic role within the continent. We need to expand our market within the African continent and increase trade. So what we're trying to do as far as Africa is concerned is to engage with a number of countries to promote the free movement of business people on the African continent. We believe that this would unleash the economic potential of this country. At the moment, the barriers are there. You know, within the ECOWAS region, of course, there is a free movement of peoples and goods, but with the rest of Africa, this is not the case. So our first initiative, and we're pushing fairly aggressively in this direction, is to engage with our African brothers to push down the barriers and facilitate the free movement of business people within the continent. Then with the world, we have to promote market access and also promote foreign direct investment. How can the foreign affairs, or how can our foreign policy best engage with, in this sector, economy, trade promotion? Our approach is to leverage on our presence in 119 countries around the world. We have embassies and missions in 119 countries around the world. And what we're planning to do is to develop a matchmaking system, a matchmaking database, to enable every business person in Nigeria that wants to upload onto this database their products or whatever, identifying the markets in which they would like to export those products, to be able to upload that on this database. And this database will also facilitate any foreign partners, businesses that want to invest in Nigeria, uploading that, and a match will be made. And we will be using each one of those 119 missions and embassies around the world to do the match. Yeah? And of course, we'll be engaging closely with the Ministry of Trade and Industry in this initiative. So that's a very concrete way of market access for Nigerian businesses and foreign direct investment without having to go through all kinds of red tape and even travel to the countries, but you know, a mechanism for engaging with partners. And then with the diaspora, the third basis, we'll also use that matchmaking database to facilitate, to also look for partnerships. So Nigerians in the diaspora, on going to the database, can either upload whatever skills they have, or whatever areas they're interested in, or whatever sectors in Nigeria they want to be engaged in, and it'll be there on the database. And then similarly, anybody in Nigeria or any business looking for Nigerians with expertise in particular sectors will be able, from the database, to identify possible matches for them. So, so this is exactly how we wish to engage with the world, with Africa, and with the diaspora through an architecture that will facilitate this matching.
All right. Yes. Please go ahead.
Yes, but of course the other arm of it is that Nigeria, we want to be a leader of Africa. So African integration is absolutely important as a foreign policy objective. And we also want to be at the table in the international sphere. And as you know, the whole issue of a permanent seat in the Security Council and just the role Nigeria plays in the international scene is something that is particularly important. So our foreign policy orientation is also towards strengthening Nigeria's presence at the high table, the G20 internationally.
Okay, let me quickly come in here, Honourable Minister. It's on record that the President has made over 20 trips abroad, you know, since his assumption of office, and this kind of shuttle, diplomacy was seen during the period of former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Of course, he made quite a number of trips abroad, and that, paid off in terms of repositioning the country's image on the international scene. But some commentators on Nigeria's foreign policy say since then, our foreign policy has, using their terms now, groped for direction and remained largely unimpressive in terms of, protecting the dignity, of Nigerians abroad. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, okay, this issue of the president's travel, the foreign ministry is essentially responsible, I'm essentially responsible for making recommendations to Mr. President as to the countries he wishes to visit. And there are strategic reasons why he visits particular countries. I think the first thing we have to realize is that the Nigeria brand has not been very strong in the past, internationally, the perception of Nigeria. And we can see that in the three priority areas. Security, the perception of Nigeria in the past was of a country that was faced with an acute, serious insurgency that we're unable to handle and manage, and with terrorists that were engaging our military, occupying territory, as an insecure place to do business and to visit. This was the perception that prevailed when Mr. President came into office. If you look at corruption, we were having all kinds of scandals about how many billions of dollars, have not been accounted for or missing and so forth. And so that, governance perception of Nigeria as very corrupt and an unsafe place to do business in. And also, on the economy, the unemployment situation and streams of Nigerians migrating to other countries. So this was a negative perception of the country. So Mr. President, when he came into office, through the democratic process, the first time that the opposition has come into power, it captured the imagination of the world. Yeah, they captured the imagination of the world, and he himself, his own personal story, is also something that captured the imagination of the world. It's a bit similar, in a sense, to Nelson Mandela or Barack Obama. That compelling story of somebody, in Mandela's case, years and years and years in prison, in exile, who maintained his integrity, never, compromised his principle and his focus, and kept battling until, the triumph. And ditto with, Barack Obama, the struggles and arriving there. And the world was absolutely captivated by the stories and also the personal qualities of the individuals. And to a certain extent, it's the same with our president. In the wilderness, 4 attempts at becoming a president, unimpeachable integrity that he's respected for, and finally making it. And we saw the response, the global response. And so changed the brand, his own personal brand, just the same as Mandela and Barack Obama during his first
let me just ask this question, because you've articulated it, Honorable Minister. The point that some commentators have indicated has to be, look, what are the dividends of these trips?
Exactly. On
the basis of, security, anti-corruption, and then economic development.
Precisely.
Tick off some of the benefits.
Exactly. Yes. So I'm sorry, maybe I went on a bit too long. But so the point I'm trying to make is that the foreign partners now wanted to, and were falling over themselves, to meet this person, to engage with this person, and for them, that was bringing, a stronger brand, the personal brand. So we have wanted to capitalize on the personal brand of the president and use that to attain precisely these objectives that you're talking about. So in the area of security, we know for a fact that before he came on, a number of countries were not prepared to sell weapons to Nigeria. A number of countries were not prepared to assist us in our military engagements. And what did we see? Because precisely of this profile, they were falling over themselves to come to help Nigeria engage with the terrorists. So the dividends were very clear. He went out, first of all, to the immediate neighbors, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Benin, and reactivated, re-energized the multinational joint task force. And we saw the effects. From controlling 14 local government areas, they were transformed immediately and were able to recover all those and completely reverse the military trend. So that was a very concrete deliverable achieved through what I was telling you about. And it's the same with the economy. You know, a lot of countries that were not very keen to do business with Nigeria were inviting him to come over and are very keen to engage with Nigeria. We've seen the benefits. He went to address the European Parliament for it. That was a serious vote of confidence by the European community in the president and in Nigeria, in the new Nigeria, and wanting to now engage with Nigeria. This did not happen earlier, and ditto with all the other countries that he's been to. And we have selected them carefully, looking for very precise deliverables. And we have been getting those deliverables, you know, in terms of investments and promises of investments.
One leg of it, Claire, it's anti-corruption. Yeah. You know, up until a couple of days ago, there were still stories about Switzerland and the federal government agreeing on the repatriation, terms for the repatriation of the Abacha loot. Of course, Sani Abacha General died in 1998. Some persons are concerned about the efficacy of the moves to ensure that monies that are stashed away in foreign locations and institutions and banks can in fact be brought back to Nigeria as quickly as possible. From the president's engagement with various leaders and institutions, what indications are we getting in this regard?
Well, the first thing is that at the highest political level in a lot of these countries, they are determined and keen to work with Nigeria to repatriate these funds. And we cannot say that that has always been the case. You know, in the past, the willingness was not always there because they had all kinds of apprehensions about the process. But now at the very highest level, so we're talking about presidents, you know, of some of the biggest countries in the West are making real commitments and engaging with us in trying to help us to repatriate these funds. But of course, you know, there are procedures, there are legal procedures. First, so the challenges are what? Identifying these funds, where they are, and you know, there are all kinds of ruses that are used, you know, to hide funds and that kind of thing. We know that. But the political will is there in these countries to help us, and they are helping us, not just Switzerland, you know, the UK, the US, the Gulf countries, and so forth. So what is important there is really that commitment when the countries are willing, and they are now ready to do that because of the brand Buhari that I'm talking about. You know, they believe more in Nigeria, that they are dealing with you know, a country that is not going to brook corruption, that's not going to use the monies to put into other people's, into their pockets. So I think that's extremely important. And in this context, I'd just like to say that, for instance, the British Prime Minister has been engaging, you know, one-on-one with our president to develop strategies on how to tackle this issue of looting of funds and illicit transfers of monies.
Okay, Mr. Onyema, some Nigerians, you know, are concerned that in the pursuit of economic, you know, cooperation and integration, in the pursuit of, you know, peace, you know, with our neighbors, and of course, the position, you know, in the Committee of Nations, that our foreign policy have tended to be complacent about the interests and concerns of Nigerians, especially those in the diaspora. And, you know, I remember some time ago when a particular domestic, you know, help somewhere in, I think in Singapore, you know, was murdered, you know, just on suspicions of a murder. And that event sparked off a kind of a very dynamic, diplomatic foreign policy, from Philippines. Now we have Nigerians, especially in some, friendly neighboring countries in diaspora, who have been, killed, murdered. You remember the recent xenophobic attack in South Africa. How much have those incidents helped to drive our foreign policy?
I wouldn't say that those incidents per se are what drives our foreign policy. Our foreign policy, as I said, the diaspora is an important part of our foreign policy. And ab initio, we protect Nigerians anywhere in the world that Nigerians are. It is our job, and it's something we take seriously. So
what kind of protection?
Well, precisely. So every embassy and every mission is there to assist and fight and help Nigerians in those countries. Now, don't forget, you're dealing with sovereign countries that have their laws. So our laws and our enforcement mechanisms do not extend to those countries, just as theirs do not extend to us. But we have the channels through which we engage with the governments to ensure that Nigerians in those countries are treated as they should be under the law, lawfully. And where there are cases of Nigerians being maltreated or killed or whatever, these issues are taken up by our presence in those countries.
But most people have also, argued that our missions abroad are not accessible. The way they are treated, very unfairly. And recently, Kingsley, there were, we've heard that some of those missions really, will be shut down, because of their ineffectiveness, if I may use that word.
No, that's not, I wouldn't say no, that's not the case. Well, no news is good news, essentially. So and you are, you journalists and the media people would know better than I do.
But I'm sure you must have heard of the concerns of the raised about our missions abroad.
Yes, I mean, no. When you sort of paint them all, in that light, it's not totally accurate. They're doing a lot of very good work, but of course, that's not newsworthy, Our missions abroad are doing excellent work. But of course, yes, there will be cases, where maybe they haven't given full satisfaction. And we're working extremely hard to address those. That's one of the areas that this government is really trying to address, to change. We talk about the change mantra. And we really want there to be real change in this country. It's not going to be overnight, it can't be overnight, because it's a culture of so many years that we've been just used to doing things a certain way. But we are determined to change the way we do things. And some of what you're saying, and I think, a lot of it is, some of it is true. Those are challenges that we're seeking to address. And training is going to be an important part of that. We have to train and retrain our civil servants, to have a service orientation and dedication and patriotism. And it cannot be about entitlement. And we're really trying to push that forward.
Mm. All right. Well, Honourable Minister, just a number of points that we can actually right on the last response you just gave to my colleague's question. What is the status of funding for our missions now? And secondly, you've said that we have our presence in some 119 locations. Are you going to retain all 119?
That's a good question. It's also part of the dysfunction of our civil service that we have seen over the years, when you talk about funding. And there has been a lot of dysfunction. And these are challenges that we're trying to face, we're trying to address. A new way and a more effective way of employing people in our various missions and embassies abroad, they have to be functional and respond to particular needs. Our recruitment patterns in the past have really been totally arbitrary, and people, given jobs, there's been no coherence, in our employment practices. So those are the things. So a lot of missions are overstaffed, and the staff there are not responding to the particular functions of those missions. So we're trying to address those issues. And on the question of reducing the number of missions, Nigeria, as I said, we want to be at the big table. We're ambitious. We're a big country, the biggest economy in on the continent, the 7th most populous nation on earth, tremendous resources, human and material, and Nigeria has to be one of the 20 big countries in the world. And we have to have a presence around the world to be able to project our power, our interests, economic and otherwise. So, closing missions and embassies willy-nilly is not something that is necessarily going to enhance that. But what we do want to do is to rationalize our missions. So if there are any that are not serving and are not going to help us to attain those objectives, then clearly there might not be any need for them.
Well, there's another question to ask in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. It's 30 years this year since TAC came on board. That is the Technical Aid Corps, and that was under Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. Considering the financial and economic pressures that Nigeria is facing at this time, is there still a utility for the Technical Aid Corps?
There is a utility for the Technical Aid Corps because, at the end of the day, it is really, as I said, what you see yourself doing in the world. And we want to be leaders in Africa. And we feel that as the big power in Africa, we want to engage with our African brothers and sisters, help in peacekeeping in those countries, technical assistance, promote economic relations, and support other African countries. Because although we in Nigeria, and you're right, we have our challenges, but nevertheless, we are still in a position to help other countries, and we should. So things like the Technical Aid Corps, we have a surplus of graduates, a lot of them unemployed, and nothing could be better than to use them in other countries to help other countries technically, and this is really important, and it serves a lot of interest. It helps to promote African integration. It helps to project Nigeria's image in these countries, and we continue to do that, and it's right that we do that.
Can we, Claire, I just wanted to ask, can we establish a nexus between Brand Buhari, whom you've talked about, the new Nigeria, the change mantra, as well as Nigeria's quest for a permanent seat on the UN Security Council? Are the odds now more favorable towards Nigeria?
Absolutely. A lot of these things are also perception, and perception really counts a lot. And that's why I was harping on the Brand Buhari. And if you recall, when Mandela, I don't want to go back to him at all because each situation is unique, but the South Africans really took advantage of the brand Mandela. Economically, they were getting all the major sporting events, into South Africa and so on and so forth. We saw that with Lula in Brazil, the same thing. So your leader is really, really important and can really help to rebrand your country. And my simple answer to that is yes. I think that the Brand Buhari can help us to achieve that. And you see that because every major power wants him on their territory. They want to speak to him. They want to have him there. They also want to just benefit to a certain extent from that glow, that allure, and that charisma that is developing around him. So yes, we can take advantage of that to facilitate Nigeria's chances of getting a permanent seat in the context of the reform of the United Nations. Yeah.
Honourable Minister, of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyema. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll probably look at Nigeria's quest, for a place at the UN Security Council. That has been, of course, in the burner for quite some time. Okay. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation.
We have always lived together as brothers and sisters. Though we speak different languages and celebrate different cultures, we were still one Nigeria. There was no bombing, there was no kidnapping, and our children were not cultists. Now, we suspect one another as there are spreads of cultism, bombing, and kidnapping. How long shall this go on? Terrorism is alien, kidnapping is criminal, cultism is barbaric. Nigeria is a blessed country. Supports the Nigeria police and the fight against terrorism, kidnapping and cultism. Always inform the police of any incident around you. Say something when you suspect something.
Remember, we all have a stake in building a crime-free Nigeria of our dream.
This message is from the Nigeria Police Force.
You get 3 kinds of moms. The paranoid mom, the cautious mom, and the Dettol mom. She only trusts Dettol antiseptic liquid to protect her family from up to 100 illness-causing germs, and it's recommended for cuts and scrapes, which is why you can worry less and love more. Don't just be any mom, be a Dettol mom.
Helen! Would you like some water? It's cold, especially for you.
Which era are you living in? We have a fridge.
When everything else in your house is from the present, then why are your toilet cleaning methods from the past? Harpic, all-in-one for you. Compared to other toilet cleaners, Harpic removes top stains, kills all germs, and removes bad odors. For a shining, clean, and fresh toilet.
Wow.
You should also take the Harpic
all-in-one challenge.
You get 3 kinds of moms. The paranoid mom.
It's hot and it's dirty.
The cautious mom. And the Dettol mom. Only a Dettol mom knows that ordinary soaps aren't enough. She only trusts Dettol to protect her family from up to 100 illness-causing germs, which is why you can worry less and love more. Don't just be any mom, be a Dettol mom. Dettol, be 100% sure.
All right, you're welcome back, but if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As you can see from the caption on the screen, we are this morning discussing Nigeria's foreign policy, and we still have with us Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyema. Now, in addition to the broad outlook of Nigeria's foreign policy, we're also this morning taking on a specific item, namely the visit by South Africa's President, Mr. Jacob Zuma. He left yesterday after a 3-day visit to the country. When he came, of course, he had a number of South African business persons on his entourage. This morning we have with us in the studio the Group Managing Director of Hydrofoam International of South Africa, Mr. Robert Plattner. Mr. Plattner, it's a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's look at this. The South African president was quite emphatic that, look, 20 years ago, he knew how many companies, South African companies, were in Nigeria. Today, the companies, are probably uncomfortable in the sense that they're almost up 100 or more, and your company is one of those entities that now operate in Nigeria. What for South Africans, has been the attraction of the Nigerian business environment?
I think the opportunity, the number of people living in Nigeria gives you a tremendous market for your product. Our product being housing for the people, the need for housing of Nigerians, it gives us a huge opportunity. We active in 50 countries on the continent, South Africa being one of them. That's where we started the technology. But I think 20 years ago we made a decision, we need to be in Nigeria. And Nigeria has been one of our best countries to do business with.
Your company is one of the, those business outfits that, came on the entourage of Mr. President, that's talking about President Zuma. Specifically, what business, enforcement have you identified now? What are those things that you've seen, changed that you're interested in?
I think now with the new objective of the new government to build 1 million houses per year, I think we're well placed to support the government in achieving it. And we're not seen as a construction company. We want to teach people how to build their own houses using our technology.
Okay.
Well, in addition to the points that you have just explained, what challenges or barriers do you find in trade relations or business relations between South Africa and Nigeria?
The biggest one for me is movement. You need a month planning to be able to come to Nigeria because of regulations and I think the minister mentioned it, visa. And visa is on both sides. South African business people coming to Nigeria is a problem, and vice versa. We're getting Nigerian people coming to visit us. We do training in South Africa. It is very difficult for me to get Nigerians to come to our country. So it works both ways. So free movement of people and business people, for me, is the key, because you cannot run a business on months planning just to visit a country. It's impossible. It is easier to go from Europe to South Africa than to go from South Africa to Nigeria. It shouldn't be like this.
It's almost a paradox. You're a businessman. It's a paradox because sometimes when you hear stories about the perception of Nigeria in the outside world, it is as though the ease of doing business is so tedious. Nigeria ranks, according to some data, that Nigeria ranks pretty low. And yet we are seeing an influx of South African companies into the Nigerian environment. So is it that you are able to leapfrog these obstacles, so that others are just exaggerating the challenges in the Nigerian business environment?
I think we have to adapt to the circumstances which are on the ground. For myself, my own experience, I never had any issues dealing or doing business in Nigeria. Yeah, there are many stories out there which people tell, which makes it, they come here and they have a bad experience and they never come here again. But it happens in every country. It can happen in any other country. It can happen in Europe. For us, I think we have to adapt. We have to do the right business. If you try to do honest business in any country, you are welcome.
Okay, Honourable Minister, you heard Mr. Robert Plattner. He talked about, mentioned two challenges, movement and of course ease of visa, procurement. What are you doing in that respect? Because this is also an issue that most people complain about, even in our other missions.
Well, it's a reciprocal thing. The countries tend to reciprocate these consular matters, but as I said earlier, it is one of the main planks in our economic diplomacy approach. We're trying to engage with a number of countries, African countries, to have, at least for business people, a free movement within the sub-Saharan region. And that would really make all the difference. It would just make it easier to do business. It will increase trade, increase wealth. And this is something that we're putting a lot of emphasis in, and we want to pursue aggressively during the term of this government.
All right, Mr. Plattner, at the bilateral level, yes, cooperation is cordial, things are going on well, investment is improving, but a lot more Nigerians in South Africa have been complaining about the kind of treatment they're getting. And indeed, some particular community of Nigerians in South Africa are saying, look, with respect to the xenophobic attack, are they likely to get compensated for in any way?
I'm embarrassed, but it has happened, you're right. It must be remembered it's a small minority of South African people which are doing that. It's certainly not across the board where South African people are against foreigners. There are many foreigners doing very well in South Africa. Many Nigerian professors, doctors, they're doing very well and they're contributing to the economy of South Africa. Unfortunately, a small minority is just making life very unpleasant for many people.
I know you're a businessman. I asked this, for you to share your perspective and what is happening. What Honorable Minister, what do you think of that?
No, he's absolutely right. It's not a state-sponsored thing, and we've seen this repeated in so many countries, even our own country. Some years back, you remember, with the Ghanaians and all that. Very often when an economy is doing well, people from, countries where the economy is not doing so well will migrate to countries where, they have a better economic prospect. And what will tend to happen is if that country now starts undergoing economic crises and the natives, the indigenous ones, now, losing their jobs and things like that, the easiest target very often will be those, foreigners, especially when they see them doing so well, and they are not. And as I said, you see this all over the world, and it's been going on in human history forever and ever. And it's one of those things. But we really have to point out that he said it's a minority of South Africans. A lot of Nigerians are doing fantastically well in South Africa, and the South African government is completely against that and putting in place the enforcement mechanisms to safeguard the lives and properties of Nigerians in South Africa.
Well, Mr. Plattner, let's come to a point, a practical point as a businessman. As you said, Hydroform has a presence elsewhere on the African continent other than South Africa and Nigeria. And Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs with us in the studios has indicated that, look, promoting intra-African trade is a priority if the continent is to grow its wealth and at the same time reduce poverty. In this context, we have a number of economic, if not political blocs. SADC, for instance, is there in South Africa. COMESA is there in East Africa. And in West Africa, we have ECOWAS. From your experience as a businessman transnationally, do you find these economic blocs as facilitators or as impediments to intra-Africa trade?
Certainly. Unfortunately, what we did is we divided Africa in bigger blocks, which shouldn't, in my opinion, shouldn't have happened. Ideally, you should have a combined Africa, and trade should flow freely between all those countries. Why have an ECOWAS or a SADC? It limits the market. South Africa being a SADC country, we have we get benefits of trading into the SADC countries. But why shouldn't we also deal in ECOWAS on the same level and on the same conditions, and vice versa? So for sure, it should be an open market, the African continent.
Honorable Minister, what's your reaction to this? Because I mean, that's the practical challenge that probably might hobble the quest for smooth intra-Africa trade.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. It's something that's being addressed at the African Union at the moment. They're trying to bring out a treaty, an African treaty on promoting greater African integration, on free movement of peoples across the whole continent. But we know the problem with these international treaties, they take such a long time to be signed and to be ratified. So that's why we are going a separate route. We're going to identify a number of key countries in Africa that we're going to try and push for like a kind of a G8, G9 group of countries and establish amongst ourselves very quickly free movement of business people amongst ourselves, and then hopefully other African countries will come in. And it will not be based on the regional economic groupings that he has talked about.
All right, Clay, I think we have a second topic for discussion this morning, and that's the restructuring of the NNPC. So we'd like to thank Mr. Robert Plattner, who is the Group Managing Director of Hydroform International of South Africa. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
By the way, NTA is Africa's largest television network. And you know also that Nigeria had television first before South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I also would like to thank Nigeria's Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyema. It's our delight that you spent some time with us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, that's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll take our second item for conversation this morning, which is the restructuring of the NNPC.